Well, welcome to Vermont Forests. The date is April 1st, 2003. Happy birthday, Jim.
I knew we were going to have to watch out for something.
This is Jim White, Bennington County Forester. I'm Claude Dern, and today we have with us Paul Frederick. And
Hi, Claude.
hi. And thanks for
Thanks
making
for coming
the
down, Paul.
trip
Thank you.
down here to visit us. And why don't you give us
Disneyland.
your title and what you do?
I'm a wood utilization forester. I work for the Department of Forest and Parks, just as Jim does. And as a wood utilization forester, essentially what I do is work with forest products industry, primary and secondary industry, so sawmills as well as manufacturers. And our job is really to help those folks both to utilize their wood better and basically giving them some information that they can use to help their business.
So I'm assuming that you have a pretty large database, if you call it that, of different industry items, prices, people, places, trends, a lot of things like that. And we've talked about that on Vermont Forests so much that Vermont forests are the biggest geographical feature of Vermont, I guess.
Yes, sir. 83 or 85% of the Vermont is forest land.
So it's an important part of the economy. And
Well, how big is it, Paul? I mean, how big is the forest products industry in Vermont?
It depends on what you use for figures, but if you look at the total contribution to the Vermont economy of forest-based industry and recreation, so in other words, recreation or tourism that's forest-based, it works out to about $1.2 billion annually that gets pumped back into Vermont's economy.
That's a B, billion.
Billion with a B,
Okay.
right. There's about 7,500 people, depending on the estimates you look at, of folks that are employed by the forest products industry in the state. And it generates roughly $200 million worth of payroll a year. So it's a big piece of the economy.
Okay.
when you say of people engaged in the forest industry, could you give an example of what some of those people might
I think in that 7,500 number, it goes everywhere from folks working in the woods harvesting timber through the sawmills, secondary manufacturers, truckers, folks working in the wood energy end of the business. But I think that's primarily folks engaged directly, not necessarily.
Would it be secretarial people?
Probably not. This is probably folks actually working in the working directly with the resource. If you add those other folks on, I've seen figures up to about 12,000 folks when you look at some of the associated industries and start talking about things like equipment manufacturers and repair and that sort of thing. It goes into the mix.
Well, we've talked in the past some about Vermont forests and their history, but I don't know that we've ever really got into the history of Vermont's forest economy. And maybe you could give us a little rundown. When did that start, and how did it start, and what's happened since then?
Some of the earliest activity in Vermont, as you well know, was clearing land, and with the earliest settlers, that activity was primarily to get rid of the forest. And early on, the idea was to cut it down, get it out of the way. Some of those early activities involved making potash, which was probably one of the earliest cash crops, so to speak, from the forest in Vermont, where the wood was basically piled up and burned either for charcoal or to create potash, which was used as a fertilizer. Mm-hmm. As transportation developed a little better, there was a lot more of a lumber economy that developed in the state, and particularly along the Connecticut River, where there was where wood was floated downstream to mills, and in the Champlain Valley, where the mills built up, and the lake was used as the main transportation source. By the early 1800s, there was an enormous lumber economy in the Burlington area. Most of the lakefront in Burlington's built on sawdust. It was really dumped there as a result of secondary wood manufacturing that was going on right along the lakeshore. A lot of that early activity was in softwood, and that was primarily because those were the species that folks were using to build structures with, and a lot of Vermont was softwood, especially in the higher elevations. There was a lot of softwood stands that have since regenerated to hardwood.
Softwood is what, Paul?
Softwood being, at that time, it was probably white pine and red spruce primarily.
But with Vermont, the Green Mountain State, and that's how it got its name.
Yeah.
For that. So the Green Mountain State is really not as green as it used to be.
Yeah, at least not this time of the year.
6 months of the year.
So, and then as time went on and the hardwood regrew, the economy shifted more to a hardwood economy in the state of Vermont. There was a lot of hardwood cut that went into things like industrial wood flooring, millwork, furniture, as time went on. I was looking through some old publications here a couple weeks ago and came across a mill directory from the mid-1960s. And it was amazing how many mills there were then that are no longer open, and a lot of products that we no longer see made from wood. Things like bobbins. Bobbin mills were fairly common even when I first started working for the state 20 years ago. But the textile industry's gotten away from using wooden bobbins and gone more to plastics, and as a result, some of those mills have gone down. There's probably more. There hasn't been much change in the capacity for milling probably in the last 20 years, but what we've seen is that the larger mills have gotten larger, and a lot of the smaller mills that existed have gone out of business or become part-time operations.
Well, in the first part of the wood economy in Vermont, I guess you took the mill to the wood because you didn't want to transport anything
Yep.
you didn't have to. And then that, of course, is all changed. But in its changing to maybe today, trucking a raw log 20 miles, 50 miles, 100, 200 miles, every town had several small sawmills.
Mhm.
Many of them were located on a farm, and the farmer part-time in the winter did this, and someone needed something for a barn, well, he could saw it out for him, and bring him the wood, or he had it and things. And a lot more people in the community maybe understood more about forestry than they do today, because they saw it. They know, oh, so-and-so is in his wood lot, he got this, he's building that, he's getting the lumber there, I've got to get a few things. And now today, native lumber, rough lumber, or even if it's plainer thing, I'm sure that the percentage used in building in Vermont is going probably down all the time, just because of the economy of scale. It's much easier to call up a lumber yard and I want this, and this, and the next day it's delivered to you. And that doesn't happen with the local neighborhood mill, and you can't get the long lengths, the big sizes, or whatever. So there's been I think a big change in the maybe the perception, or certainly the understanding of forestry by the general public than what
Just
what
like
it was.
agriculture. Yeah.
And agriculture right along with it. Do you work, say, promoting Vermont's wood industry to the general public? Is that one of your functions?
That's part of what we do. Ours is usually specifically deals with forest industry. Certainly things like forest management are done more often by the or promoting forest management is done more often by folks like the county foresters, like Jim. We unfortunately don't do as much of the direct promotion to the general public as we'd like to, but with economies the way they are and personnel, unfortunately, there's just not enough of us to go around. And
But you work with an industrial group, an association of wood manufacturers, and isn't that the best way to do it?
that's probably the most effective way to do
Efficient.
it, an efficient way for
Yeah.
us to do it with the time that we have available.
Yeah.
And we try to, a lot of times we try to partner up with other groups to get that word out to the general public. Things like the display at the Rutland Fair that the folks in Forest and Parks do every year. Oftentimes we're asked to provide them with information to use in those displays. Same thing has been done in the past at the farm show in Barry, where we've actually provided information for the folks that were putting together the displays.
Mhm.
But like Jim said, we work with a number of different industry associations, the Vermont Wood Manufacturers Association, the Forest Products Association. There's another group of small woodworking, wood manufacturers, the Vermont Wood Net that we've been working with. They're a fairly recently formed group. So we're trying to help them, I guess, with their own promotional activities. Is probably how we do most of that work with the general public directly.
There's another thing, Paul, and I get volunteered to do it, is when you do work with like a sawmill, and you do a sawmill study, and why don't you tell us about what a sawmill study is?
Sawmill studies, essentially what we're doing is going in, working directly with the folks in the sawmill to take a run of logs, grade it, actually follow it through the whole process, and then be able to take the output from each individual log and relate it back to the log we started with. So all the lumber that comes out we can account for back to a particular log. It helps the mills to understand better about what they're getting out of that particular grade of log or type of log, and at the same time gives them, we have a database of information that's been collected over the years so that they can gauge their own performance against other similar mills. And it gives them some places to start looking for ways to improve their utilization, improve the dollar return they're getting out of those particular logs.
And those particular logs make a difference to the logger and the landowner if those logs are manufactured properly too.
Absolutely.
Because you have to have in mind what the particular mill, and not all mills are alike in what they are doing. Some can use different specifications or different lengths or different diameters or whatever. So it's very important to know your market if you're selling a product.
Yeah, it's very true. Most mills have a particular set of customers that they work with, and as a result, as you said, as a result of that, they have particular a particular log, lengths, sizes, particular defects that they can deal with in different ways than another mill. And it's real important for folks that are cutting logs to get hold of the specifications that mill is buying on, and and cut those logs for the market.
Now, we're using the term mill, and it's almost inferred as being sawmill, but we do have some rotary veneer being used here, and that's a whole different process. And also, of that valuable wood, there's less waste because none of that high-dollar wood is going out in sawdust, because
That's
the
right.
whole thing's being used with rotary veneer being a round piece of wood turned against a knife and it shaved off. We did a program in Repellent plywood. They do that, and I guess Columbia Forest Products.
Columbia Forest, yep. Newport, yep.
So there are different things. Then we have other forest product things that don't even go to a sawmill. We have fence companies,
Yep.
right? That cedar fence posts, And one other, there must be a lot of little, well, we have the bowl mill, the wooden bowls. I mean, there's what unique industries exist in the state? I'm sure there are many, many of them.
The bowl mill you mentioned in Granville is an interesting one, where they're actually turning several wooden bowls out of a particular block of wood. They also, at the bowl mill, Granville Manufacturing cuts clapboards on a
Well, the process is nothing's longer than 6'4".
right.
And I guess it's like it's chucked on each end, and it looks like a skill saw. It goes down cutting 5.5 inches or 6.5 inches deep. And when the saw's on the other end, it rotates just a fraction of a degree, and the saw comes back through, and it cuts that wedge of the clapboard. And those are
Quarter sawn clapboards, which are very dimensionally stable. It's really the cream of the crop when it comes to clapboards. There's a number of mills in the state that saw log cabin logs, folks that do timber frames for homes. There are a number of small wood manufacturers and even some larger companies. We have companies in the state that go everywhere from Ethan Allen in Beecher Falls that has hundreds of employees right on the Canadian border, and they, Ethan Allen furniture, to individuals who are in their garage doing things like turning wooden pens. There's a fella that I met just last week in the Bristol area that is now turning wooden pens. He's using lumber that actually came out of the last elm tree on the State House lawn. The folks in Vermont Wood Net were able to get salvaged, and they're working now on producing some products out of that particular tree.
musical instruments.
Musical instruments are another thing that's being made all over the state. There's a gentleman here not too far from your office, Jim, that's making violins, I believe.
Yep.
There's a company in Bellas Falls that's using large diameter logs to make wooden drums. That's a real neat process.
What
to
do they
watch.
use what do they use a wooden drum for?
That's what the side pieces of the drums are actually built out of one piece of bent wood. Like large snare drums, actually built out of one piece of bent wood.
Oh, a drum is a musical
A
instrument?
drum as a musical instrument.
Okay.
Yes. And more, some of the traditional instruments, Celtic drums, tambourines, that sort of thing are being made there, as well as kind of a traditional snare drum used by fife and drum corps.
Mhm.
And apparently the wood creates a tone that's highly prized by musicians.
And of course, we make drumsticks here.
Yeah.
Drumsticks, not
Drumsticks.
of a chicken or turkey, but of
Yep.
a musical instrument. And we make a bat that the Red Sox use, this mighty bat.
Yeah.
With a hole in it?
No,
Oh.
that would be illegal. Yes, there is a hole. And this is made by a friend of mine, was Tom Fetters, who people might remember, but he used to work when Cushman's was a plant down here. And he bought a mill in Moscow, Vermont.
Yep.
And I saw him this past summer, and his big new order was for the little flag sticks. There was such a great thing after 9/11 that everybody wanted flags. And so his orders came in, and he increased his production of just these little pieces of wood, something like this, but straight, that people could, and the little point on the end, what do they call that, Claude?
Point on the end.
Okay. Point on the end of a flag to make it look like a real flag, a nice flag stick.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of little things, there's big things. And
Well, just, I think, a year ago or so, there was a group, I think, of 3 people that would buy a small diameter ash tree, including part of the root section, to make, I'm gonna call it a hockey stick, because I can't think of the real name for it.
Oh, it was, Or, crust?
It wasn't a cricket bat. It was some game that's played in Ireland.
Yeah, hurling,
Hurling, I believe it was.
yeah.
But there was a special name for the stick.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
But if I recall, it was like 9 or 10 inch top end, and I guess
Mhm.
the trick was when you cut the tree, you cut it up 6.5 feet high. Then you harvested the last part, and at the base, you went around plunge cutting into the root swell so you could get as much of that root flare in there,
Yeah.
because that made the kick on the end of it.
Yeah.
I know years ago in shipbuilding, that many of the ships, they would go into the root
Yep.
section of trees to get that angle, because they mechanically couldn't join something,
Mhm.
and that's extremely strong wood.
Yeah, and there's more of that being done now. There's quite an upsurge in folks doing historic recreations, I guess you'd say, of sailing ships, and those oak knees, as well as butt sections of spruce are being used in that kind of thing. They're right in Burlington. Where they're doing some of the recreations of some of the lake-going ships. They're using a lot of native material that's specifically sawed for those ships.
I got a trick question for you, Paul. You didn't know this was coming,
He's
but that's
gonna stump me now.
well, I should. This is a toughie. This was a person that manufactured a product out of wood within a mile of where we are right
Mhm.
now. And that's one of his blanks.
Right.
Do you know what it is?
It's probably to make a smoking pipe with.
Yeah, it is.
Is it briar?
Yes, it is, yeah. And I think briar it's a root. Is it a root?
I don't know, to be
Okay.
honest with you.
But that's what
It's a
it
good
is.
guess.
It's a very expensive wooden pipe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's one of his blanks, and he cuts them out and,
Mm-hmm.
With a little imagination, you see the pipe right
yeah.
there.
And here's an easier one. Should have dusted it off, I guess.
That's a laminate, I assume.
Yeah, and the laminate is plywood that are glued together
Mhm.
with the grain going in same direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than industrial plywood, which the grains go in the opposite direction, or 90 degrees to each other. That's from Rutland plywood.
Yeah.
And in their same process here, and I don't know if that's what they have the patent on called the compreg, but they sometimes will take each one of those veneers and dye them different colors, and have some very, very colorful
Mhm.
products.
Mhm.
And a lot of them end up as, I guess, little advertising novelties, and
Mhm.
pens and things like that.
Yeah, and it has an advantage of being very dimensionally stable. It doesn't shrink and swell like some types of wood will.
So I believe that the U.S. patent #1, signed by George Washington, was given to someone, I think, in Brandon, Vermont, I believe, for potash,
Hmm.
the process or
Hmm.
something. Wooden.
Potash was also used, I think, for soaps and stuff,
For
wasn't it?
soaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was an exported product. It was an exported product because I don't think you sold much of it in Vermont.
No, and a big thing at the same time, I mean, before the Industrial Revolution, charcoal went from this west side of the Green Mountains
Mhm.
anyway to furnish energy, and that was the hardwood.
Mm-hmm.
It was just burned.
Mhm.
It was all. I think they claimed Silas Griffith had a piece of charcoal at the Chicago World's Fair in 1888 or something. It was 3 foot big, like the biggest piece of charcoal ever be made. They had to handle it pretty
Big
carefully.
barbecue.
But another important wood product then historically was the hemlock bark for tanning.
Yes.
And then with the Industrial Revolution and things, when chemicals came about, when petroleum products came for fuel and energy and stuff, it didn't go through all of this. Made big differences. I guess the whale oil for whale oil lamps, that stopped when you got kerosene. And that was only a mere 150 years ago in time. Wooden water pipes. There were
Yeah.
Pump lawns.
yeah, wood was, we had it here. We didn't have the transportation to bring things here. If there's a way to make it out of wood, you made it out of wood. You didn't make it out of plastic, it wasn't invented yet. Where today, I'm sure plastic is taking the place of many items that were traditionally wood.
One interesting product that, it's not a wood-based product, it's a forest product, it's not necessarily a wood product, is things like cedar oil and spruce oil. Up our way where there's a lot of cedar and softwood, right up probably through the Second World War, there were a number of cedar stills around. And essentially it looked like a silo built into a bank that they'd fill with boughs from cedar trees, pump live steam into them from a small boiler, and then separate the oil that was extracted from the foliage of the cedar trees in the water that came out the end. And you boil a couple tons of brush and end up with a couple ounces of oil, but it was a very valuable product.
What did they use that for?
It's a lot of it was used in cosmetics, and it's a very, very concentrated cedar smell.
Aromatic.
It's very aromatic.
Red cedar as opposed to white cedar.
This was actually white cedar that they used in northeastern part of the state, and occasionally they'd use spruce. I just came across a product on the internet while I was looking for some information the other day that they're actually making a insect repellent with cedar oil as the active ingredient.
Well, again, throughout history, I guess anything that's capable of holding a strong fragrance for any length of time was valuable. Like the ambergris in perfume, the very expensive ones. And do you know what ambergris is?
I don't use
Be
perfume.
very, very blunt. Whale puke, whale regurgitation.
That's why I don't use perfume.
And they'd go out and
Exactly.
that's where they were killing off the whales. They'd get whale oil and they would get that made the basis of the best perfumes.
You keep mentioning whales like we have some around here. We don't have any whales.
There were whales in Vermont over in Peru. The guy makes them.
They're wooden whales.
Yeah.
Wooden whales.
Wooden whales.
Wooden whales.
Yeah.
One of the things
We
that
have everything.
that I saw as a change recently in the wood business was this term called character wood. What is character wood?
Character wood is, in many cases, what 10 years ago we probably would have called a defect. Or it can be a knot, it can be a little piece of ingrown bark, something in the grain of the wood that makes it unique. And there's been several projects done looking at what they're calling character wood, basically looking at another way of describing these characters in defects in the wood that puts a more positive spin on it. And really what's been found in the research in the market research that's been done is that folks really like these marks in the wood that makes a piece unique.
Because we spend a lot of money and energy cutting those out of woods to say a piece of furniture has to have no ingrown bark, not a knot, no sign of a knot.
Yep.
Nothing, and it costs us a lot of money and we waste a lot of wood cutting these out.
We had a company, and I sold to them one time, I don't believe it's there anymore at all, called Weirdwood in Rockingham, right near the country store there.
Yep.
And whatever you couldn't sell somewhere else because it was unusually gnarly or mineral colors in it or something else, they wanted it, and they had markets for that unusual, weird wood.
At the Rutland Fair a couple of years ago, to back what Paul was saying, there was a furniture manufacturer had 2 tables there, and one was a traditional, no defect on it, all perfect wood throughout this table, and an equal table next to it, with some of these knots and ingrown bark and everything in it, and they asked the people to vote, as they just passed by, which one do you like the best? And again, the people voted for the character wood, and the market was, I guess, the people were ahead of the market. The people said, we like this better, and so that'll make the wood resource go a lot farther.
And I've seen like beds made out of cherry, and they were probably 4 or 5 inch cherry growing in hedgerows with the way they have to sweep, but they'd have to be straight one way. They would saw a slab off of them, arrange them in the headboard of the bed, and different size posts and everything, and I think just the bed frame price was $2,500 to $3,000. And I really liked them, that they were very unique, one of a kind.
Yeah, and that's really what I guess is one of the problems with the use of character wood, particularly when you get into these kind of one of a kind pieces. It becomes very labor intensive.
It's individually made by an artisan.
Right.
Like,
And in that market, that works well. To mass produce those,
no.
in a sense, you lose a lot of the character that folks are interested in.
As many log cabins have come. I mean, I always feel a log cabin in the distance looks like a log cabin, but sometimes the closer you get, it starts to detract the more that machinery and modern practices have been put on it, as opposed to the old hand scribing and everything.
Yeah, the company, I think Beacon and Parsons, the company that did a lot of that initial research with character wood, part of what they did was really work at trying to identify the kinds of defects that they could use in more of a mass-produced product, and to really get some information so that you could reproduce those. Some defects are unsound, and in particular parts, for example, in a chair leg, you don't necessarily want those pieces or can use those pieces. In other parts that don't require don't have to have a bearing, don't have to have the capacity to bear the load, then they work just fine. So that was a lot of the research that they did too. Beyond just the whether people would accept it, was how and where you use those particular defects.
Well, I put 12-inch wide cedar siding boards down for a floor one time, and the lumberyard said, "You can't use cedar for a floor." I said, "Why?" They said, "It's too soft." I said, "It's not as soft as white pine. It's been used on these floors for hundreds of years around here," and it gave character. You see a lot of old softwood floors, and you see that the knot's a lot stronger than the rest because there's all these little hummocks, especially in stair treads, if it happens to be. And that's a certain flavor to it that some people really, really like. The other thing, I don't know that anybody's ever been able to create in a new wood product, and that's, I believe they call it patina, the kind of slow discoloration that takes place in wood, but it takes aging to do that, and it's kind of a honey colored like in a pine. And I don't think there's been any process that can duplicate that. You know, we've had Vermont Barn Board Company and stuff where they routed out things and sprayed them and stuff, and again, in the distance it didn't look bad. When you got up real close, you'd say, hey, that's not a real barn board.
That's not weather.
Right. And you'll find a lot of furniture companies doing similar things with paint and finishes, essentially building a brand new piece of furniture that's designed to look like it's 150 years old.
It would take like some tire chains and beat the wood and things like that. Like people's clothing, they shoot jeans, right, and lay them on rocks and everything, and they can sell them for double.
That looks well, there, over there, that's what I'm looking for. That, I think, will solve all my problems. Yep, I think that's exactly what I'm looking for. That store over there, I think that's a store. It's really got a whole bunch of stuff inside anyway. Look, there goes another one of those things where I don't know how am I going to get across here. I'm going to have to go real quick, I guess. Ooh, look there, it says fresh honey. Yep, That's the place I want to go. But now, gee, look, here come some more of those things. Oh, I'm going to have to get across here real quick, and I don't know how fast a bear can run. The road looks a little slippery, too. Wow, that scared me. Oh, I don't like these at all. Oh, no. Well, looks to be okay now. Now look up to the left. Nothing coming. Look up to the right. Nothing coming. Let's go. Nothing. Oh, this has to be the right place. Look at that. Fresh honey. I can smell it already, even though it's in jars or cans or whatever, but I can smell it. Must be in here somewhere. Let's go and find out. Wow, they sure have a lot of things in there. Oh, look, there's a bear. Sorrel. Yep. Hey, it's a Canadian bear. Oh, there's more honey. Honey cut. I guess they cut honey here for me. Well, that'd be nice. Let's see what else they have around here. Clay pigeons. I didn't know pigeons were made out of clay. Just what I need for the wintertime is a nice little collar to go around my neck, keep me warm when I'm hibernating. Yeah, my fur is enough, but boy, this will really add to it. Well, it looks like an awful stiff rope. Who'd ever use a rope that stiff? Well, look at that. They have cat crunchies. I wonder if they have bear crunchies. Oh, this is the right place. There's some seeds for my birds. Plenty of those. Horseshoes? Maybe I should get a pair of shoes. I wonder if they're nice. They're like alligator shoes, maybe? What else do we have over here? Horseshoe nails? I need nails for my horseshoes? I bet that would hurt. Wonder if they have loafers in them. Let's see what else we have around here. Somebody told me that Dennis and Ruth run this place. Now all I'd have to do is find them. They must be busy. I'll just keep looking around for them. Wow, they have a lot of everything here. Look at this. They got toothbrushes. Look at all those brushes over there for people for their brushing their teeth. Boy, I never knew there was such a variety. See, there's some there for big mouths, little baby mouths. Yep. Brushes of all kinds for all kinds of people. Let's see what else they have around here. There's cold. I don't want cold. It's supposed to be summertime. Just all sorts of things. What's that up there? Oh, hey, that's Paul Bunyan's hatchet, I bet. I wonder if he knows it's here. And I bet you they might have found it out in the woods and they put it up there in case he comes in. Yeah, well, next time I see him, I'll tell him, hey, I found your hatchet. I know where it is. Dennis and Ruth got it. Ha ha ha. What are these things here? Flea be gone? Oh, I could use some of that. I get fleas every now and then. Maybe I'll have to get some of that. Yep. And then, that's I need that. Can't dry. Keep my den nice and dry. It gets a little damp in there sometimes. They've got Captain Wettable. Well, I guess that's you gotta wet something. I don't know. And what is this? Colorado potato beetle beater. You can go out and you beat up your beetles with potatoes? I don't know. And what's this? Brush be gone. Well, over there they have a whole bunch of brushes, man. They just pick them up and throw them out if they don't want them. I don't know. This brush be gone. Why do they have brushes in one place and a place to get rid of brushes? Don't understand that. Old people, humans, I don't know. Let's see. What all these things, boy, I tell you. What? Harry? Oh, it kills Japanese beetles? What would you have Japanese beetles here in the United States for? I don't know. Oh boy, I tell you, all these things, yeah, I gotta go and find my seeds. They gotta be around here somewhere. Well, I think this is the right department. There's looks like garden stuff there, and over here there's some beans and looks like seeds and I don't know what those onions maybe, I don't know. I wonder if there's anyone around to help me.
Hi. Oh my gosh, there's a bear. Dennis, there's a bear in here.
My goodness. It's okay. I'm harmless, really. My name's Bruin. And hi. Maybe can you guys help me? Maybe I'm looking to start a garden. And I have a list here.
Okay, you got a list?
Yeah.
Shopping bear.
Promise you won't bite me?
Oh, I won't bite. Nope. I might give you a bear hug,
Okay.
but I won't bite. I promise that.
Okay, this your list?
That's my list.
Okay.
I'm not really quite too sure what all's on my list.
Okay.
Let's see.
You need some snap peas?
Yeah, snap peas. I like those.
Okay,
Click, click,
yep.
click, snap, snap, snap. You know.
We got some of those.
Okay.
Some peanuts?
Yes, peanuts.
Oh, peanuts. We
Yeah.
got those too, yes.
I like peanuts. All nuts. See, what I'm trying to do is all fall. I have to travel many miles to get my food, and I decided that maybe it'd be smart, like you humans do. I build a garden, and I put in all the snap peas and the nuts and all that kind of
Oh.
stuff, and apples and all, and I won't have to travel so far. See?
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea too. So maybe you can help me out. That's
Okay.
a long list I have there.
Yes. Kidney beans.
Yes, yeah,
We got
kidney
those.
beans. Okay.
And bananas.
Bananas, yeah, one of my favorites. I like bananas. I can plant those seeds and grow bananas. Oh, yeah, that'd be real great.
Grub and slug stuff.
Grub and slug stuff, yeah, I like grubs, you know. If I can have them all come up at one spot, I'll be real happy.
Oh, we can do that.
Oh,
And
good.
Bird seed.
Yes, yeah,
we
bird
got
seeds,
that.
yeah, I want to plant. I like birds. They flutter all over the place, and they just look so nice, so I want to grow some birds.
Macaroni. We
Yeah.
got that.
Oh, okay, I like macaroni. Got any cheese? Cheese tree?
Yeah, we got cheese.
Okay.
Coconuts. We don't have coconuts.
No. Oh, where am I gonna go get coconuts?
I don't know.
Oh, well, maybe some other store might have some coconuts.
Popcorn. We got popcorn.
Okay, good. Popcorn's one of my favorite things. I like to watch it go pop, 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 pop all over the place. Do you like popcorn?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I like mine with garlic on it and some hazelnuts in there and some beech nuts. Do you like it that way too?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I like it with butter and salt.
salt, butter. Well, maybe I'll try that.
Yeah. Succotash.
Yeah, succotash. I like succotash. I think have it all grow in one spot. That'll be good.
We
don't
got
you?
beans and corn, but we don't have succotash. You have to make your own.
Oh, I have to make my own? Oh, I want to go and grow together. Well, okay, I'll make it.
Okay. Berries.
Yes, berries. Any kind of berries. I like
think
berries.
we don't have any berries.
Nope.
No, have to go someplace else for those.
Oh, so he said it was something about chuckberries too, but nobody's ever told me what a chuckberry is.
No. Sunflowers. We got sunflowers.
Okay, good. I like sunflowers.
And we got squash.
Oh, squash, yeah, that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. We got
Okay, corn.
apples.
Apples, good,
Yes.
good.
And vitamins.
Yeah, vitamins.
We don't have any vitamins.
Oh, no vitamins? Well,
No.
I'll have to go somewhere else and get the vitamin seeds.
We got some mosquito net.
Oh,
Yep.
good. Mosquito netting, good. I need
Yeah.
that.
Okay, good. 911 fertilizer.
Yeah, that's like, I was looking for some of that Act 60 manure, but I don't know where I can find that anywhere.
No, I don't know either. We got regular old cow manure.
Oh, okay. Might be the same stuff.
Yeah. We got some tools.
Oh, got tools? Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
That's where I was in this department. Lots
Okay.
and lots of tools.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got almond joy.
Almond
we
joy?
have.
Oh, good, because I like almonds, you know. And I figure that to be
Good.
happy almonds I like a lot.
Yes. Bear radish.
Yep, bear radishes.
We got
Yep.
radishes.
Well, see, I've heard of horseradish, so I figured there's got to be bear radish.
I see. Okay. Honeysuckle.
Oh, yes, I like anything that has to do with honey.
We got honey. Yeah, we got lots of honey.
Okay, have any honeysuckle? I mean, that's what I
No.
do. I suckle the honey, but
Just honey.
Oh,
Good old
just
honey
honey.
in a jar.
okay.
Bear stew.
Yeah, bear
What are you
stew.
gonna do with bear stew?
Well, I figured that the bear stew would be pretty good, don't you think? Don't you think?
I would think so.
Huh? No? Well, bear stew, isn't that nutritious?
Oh, I would think so.
Yeah. You know
Yeah.
what all goes in bear stew?
Oh, I do.
What goes into bear stew?
Oh, carrots and potatoes and
Yep.
bears.
Wait a minute. The bear goes in the stew?
Yes.
Oh, I don't want to go into the stew. I want to eat the stew. I thought it was stew for bears. You mean it's made with bears?
Yes.
Well, I don't take a bath in hot water like that. I go into a cold stream and take a bath.
Okay. Guess we won't have bear stew then.
No,
No.
scratch that one.
Okay.
Oh, I don't want the bear stew, not at all.
Okay, we got honeydew melons.
Oh, yes.
Melons.
I like honeydew melons, don't you?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
They're good, especially when they're nice and ripe. Mm.
Buckwheat. We
Yep,
got that.
buckwheat. Yep, I want some buckwheat.
Okay. Ant traps.
Yep, ant traps. I need ant traps.
We got that. A fishing pole.
Yep, fishing pole.
And-
That's the way I can catch my fish without
Yes,
getting my hands
there you
wet.
go.
My paws, my claws, whatever.
And fighting peas.
Yeah, fighting peas. You know what fighting peas are,
No,
don't you?
what are fighting peas?
Black-eyed peas.
Oh, black-eyed peas.
Yeah. So,
We got black-eyed beans. How about that?
oh, that's probably the same thing, fighting beans?
Okay.
Same thing,
Oh,
I
I
guess.
think so.
Sure,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'm ready. Where's the tank? I want to drive a tank. Hey, you look familiar. Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Well, I haven't seen you since this winter when I was using your snowplow.
It looks like you lost a little weight.
Well, that happens in the spring, you know. So now I get to eat all summer long and gain more weight.
There you go.
Well,
Been up to see the tanks yet?
well, you can see by my outfit here, I've joined up.
Oh,
So I was sleeping and they woke me up and I decided this was a good group to join. So yeah, hopefully I'm going to get inside one of those tanks. I don't know. Boy, I tell you, I never thought when I woke up that I'd be joining the National Guard. And boy, look at all this activity. They've got tanks here, they've got Humvees, they got everything. Boy, what a lucky bear I am. Ooh, boy, what a lucky bear I am. Hey, I understand this is where I can come to get some grubs. Is that right? Is that what this is? This is where you give out the grubs?
you're absolutely right.
Oh, what kind of grubs do you have? You have those neat ones that I find under rocks and in old trees and all that?
Yeah, no, we got pork chops today.
Pork chops? Wait a minute. I grubs. That's what I was looking for. It smells pretty good though.
We got some carrots.
Carrots,
We got carrots to go with
Some
that.
lettuce.
Peas, yeah.
lettuce. Well, you know, I'm growing some carrots and lettuce. And somebody said something about putting it in a stew, and then they said about a bear stew, and I wasn't too fond of that. But, so you got pork chops, but no grubs, huh?
No.
Oh, maybe I misunderstood. Somebody said if I wanted grubs, I was to come down over here. But pork chops, that's human food.
Well, bears like them too, though.
Yeah, occasionally I find them in the garbage can, some old spare ribs and pork chops and things like that. They're pretty good. And same with the carrots.
But it still feels like winter. This morning it's down 15 degrees or so.
Yeah.
The calendar says it's spring, but I know I had my wood stove going. Wood heat. It's a big thing in Vermont. I almost think that Vermont has more buildings, more dwellings heated with wood than any other state in the nation, I believe, in percentage-wise. But where are we going with the large-scale wood? We have it in some municipal buildings, government buildings, schools.
Yep, Vermont's really been in the forefront with wood heat and commercial buildings. Well, there's a lot of wood heat and energy use in industrial buildings. Certainly in sawmills and secondary manufacturers, it's been common for years and years. Just probably within the last 12 to 15 years, a number of schools have converted to wood energy as well. There's about 26 schools in Vermont now, public and private, that are burning wood chips as opposed to using oil or natural gas. It's a real significant savings as far as the fuel cost goes. And it has environmental advantages as well. Certainly it's a renewable resource where where petroleum isn't.
The money stays in the community instead of going overseas.
Money stays in the state.
Even a smaller area than that, doesn't it? I mean, within the state, it stays in
Yeah,
small areas. So.
It depends on the suppliers. There's certainly, we could use more folks to supplying wood chips to schools. It's primarily done from sawmills. They're residue chips produced from what's left over when you produce lumber out of logs. The edgings, the trim ends that are chipped up. A lot of them go into making paper. They go to International Paper or Finch Brine or Mead or any of the paper mills around the Northeast. But these essentially being used, same product, but it's being used for fuel in the schools.
We have 2 wood energy plants in the state, right?
Yeah.
We have one in Burlington and one in Reigate.
Right.
And we were going to have one in Bennington, and all of a sudden didn't hear anything more about it again. It was like 10 years ago or so. And what a great thing that would be for promoting good forests in the area, because as we've said so many times that those inferior species, deformed trees and things,
Crowded, too.
crowded, that they got to get removed, just like weeding your garden, thinning your garden, and you can't afford to do it unless you can sell it somehow and get reimbursed for the work that goes into it. So are we going to have a new school around here with some wood heat?
Well, after years of wrangling, they have broken ground for the middle school down in Bennington. The Mount Anthony Middle School will be heated entirely with wood heat from wood chips. So the community stood up and followed. Well, it's going to follow the rest of the state, I guess. If there's 26 other schools already doing it, they've taken the bugs out, hopefully out of the process.
But when we say a wood chip, depending on what process there is there to burn it, a wood chip is not a wood chip is not a wood chip. There's good ones, bad ones, and things.
Yeah.
And it isn't like if someone comes in and takes down a tree on your lawn and chips up everything that's in there, leaves, needles, and everything else, that chances are that's not going to work. And when you get too small a diameter wood, it gets stretched out, and it needs some uniform pieces in order to, I guess, be mechanically handled, plus to burn with some uniformity and things.
Yeah, there's been a lot of advances made since we first started with the heating schools with wood chips. Some of the earliest systems used tractor-trailer vans for storage and little bobcats or tractors with buckets on them to load wood into hoppers that fed the furnaces. Those have essentially all been replaced at this point with automated feed systems. The schools all have fairly large bins that'll hold the chips and feed systems that automatically pull the chips out and meter them into the furnaces, into the boilers. So it's a lot more like burning oil than having to throw wood in your furnace or your wood stove.
And when you look at a chimney, what are you going to see?
You're basically, on a cold day, you're going to see steam.
Nice,
on a
clean.
on a little warmer day, you probably won't see anything at all.
Yeah. You'll be able to see those heat ripples if you look real close.
Yep.
You're not going to smell anything?
No, it's contrary to what most folks think. You don't smell creosote like you often
from my
do
house?
around your from your wood stove, or
But it's having that higher temperature.
it has a very
high flue temperature.
yeah, it's a very high temperature. What essentially the systems do is kind of gasify the wood, burns it in 2 stages. So there's the first stage drives a lot of the gases out of the wood, which are then travel into another portion of the boiler where additional air is introduced, and you get essentially a fire a lot like natural gas.
A flame.
You get a very high temperature flame that eliminates a lot of the gas, the other products that you'll find coming out of a wood stove. Some of the newer systems, particularly the larger ones that are required to have air quality permits, also have systems in them built into the also have systems built in to remove a lot of the particulate matter, which is really one of the the big problems with some
Any type of combustion.
wood burning, any type of combustion.
Well, I wonder, are there more people using wood in homes than there were? I can imagine that, like, if oil prices are here, then wood usage is going up here, and when the oil prices go down, the wood goes down somewhat.
I can only tell you from my experience and talking to folks, we haven't for the several years done a survey of fuel wood users, of residential folks burning wood. Over time, with the last several surveys we did, we could see a steady kind of decline in the number of folks that were burning wood. Talking with firewood dealers, a couple years ago when oil prices hit record highs, there was a really strong demand for wood. Then last winter we had an unusually warm winter. A lot of those folks didn't sell nearly the wood they had the year before. I think, this year you'll probably see that again. As, like you say, Claude, as oil prices go up, folks are talking more about burning wood. Some fellas that I know that are logging have told me that if they had dry wood available, they could sell all they had. They're receiving 2 or 3 calls a day during the coldest part of the winter for firewood.
One kind of a unique use for wood chips is at Colton Enterprises, that he uses the wood chips in a big wood boiler to run dry kilns to dry his firewood
Yep.
with.
Yeah, and Ray Colton is one of the barometers I guess I use to get an idea of how firewood is selling, and normally he has a pretty large pile of firewood logs on his lot, and I noticed this morning when I came down by there, he's probably got less inventory than I've ever seen there.
Well, that's good.
But some of that wood, I think quite a little bit of it is going in Massachusetts, Connecticut.
Yeah, there's a lot of applications, I guess, for wood chips, and the schools is one of the applications. State buildings are using more wood chips. There really has become a system in place now that when state buildings starts looking at new buildings or refurbishing old buildings, that they're looking at wood energy as a potential way of heating those buildings. It didn't. The State House complex, the downtown Montpelier, is all the state buildings are heated by a central boiler plant that uses wood.
Where is that at, Paul?
It sits kind of behind the old the motor vehicle building, right next to the river. There's a large boiler plant right there, and they burn.
Right by the bicycle bridge.
Yeah, right by next to the bicycle bridge. The large smokestack that you see there in downtown Montpelier is the central heating plant for all the state buildings. And one of the projects that we've been working on is trying to work with some other folks that are interested in expanding that district energy system to downtown Montpelier. There's a group involving the state buildings as well as folks from the city of Montpelier who are looking at the possibility of extending those heating pipes essentially to a lot of the downtown businesses. There's some real advantages in having one large heating system over having individual systems in each building. And it also, at the same time, creates a market for more of the low-grade wood that we're talking about.
So a tractor trailer, how many tractor trailers would they use a day in the winter? I mean, more than one, or?
Meadoway Lumber Company. And I'm going to say, just guessing, they may have 5 acres of buildings and kilns and things, and they heat the whole plant. They will on a day when it's 10 to 20 below, they will consume the equivalent of, say, 55 to 60 cords of chips. That's a lot of wood as a building. The whole plant. They will on a day when it's 10 to 20